Hello, researchers. Today we're going to be talking about literature reviews. This is something that you must undertake before going about your research of a specific client, of a specific issue, of that client with that issue in your area. It is the understanding of what has been done in the field. What do we know about this issue? Who has researched it? What have they found? Have they used robust research methods? That means that everything that you include in your literature review, every reference needs to be a peer-reviewed article or book chapter that has reliable methods and results so that you can understand exactly what works with this issue, with this population, hopefully within this issue. Now, I want to tell you first, before we go completely into the literature review, the difference between a lit review and an annotated bibliography. Sometimes people get them confused. An annotated bibliography is basically a list of one article after the other about this issue. So let's use the example of ADHD, which we used the other day. So an annotated bibliography would have in alphabetical order different authors' approach to ADHD, what they have studied. And you'd read an excerpt, or you'd write an excerpt about each study. What was done, what are the strengths and weaknesses, is it applicable, so forth. A literature review studies the actual issue. If you want to know all about the field, the issue, the population with this issue, what has been done, what works, and specific examples, this is where you go for that. This is what you write to describe that. It doesn't separate them out. You don't say, in this study, they did this. In that other study, they did this. With this issue, this has been done, and we understand the issue because it has been studied in this way, and then you'd list multiple people. So every paragraph in a literature review is actually thematic. You want to break it down. What is known about this issue? What has been done? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Are there complications with certain populations? Are there different outcomes with certain populations or certain areas, geographic areas, areas within the field? It is not a list of article after article after article. So I don't want to see that when you submit your literature reviews. I do not want to see a list. I want to see all of the different authors that you read all put together. Complicated as it may be, you need to write them in a thematic way. This is why I've assigned an outline as an extra credit assignment. Now, the outline is going to bleed slightly into the annotated bibliography because it's a chance for you to make notes. So you're going to write your outline thematically. So each paragraph, each section of your outline will be a different piece of your literature review, a different theme within it. And then under there, you will go into the different articles that fit that piece. Because let's say you read 10 articles, not all 10 will talk about your particular population. Okay, so again, why do we do literature reviews? So that we can understand fully what's happening with this particular issue. Not so that we just see what was done 20 years ago, like our boss has been telling us. Not so we just see the latest piece that was done this past year and just barely published, so that we have a comprehensive view of this particular issue. So we are extremely well informed. So when you pull up an article, any article that is a peer-reviewed research article about your issue, you should see in there their literature review. In fact, you should read through that to see what they found to be known about this, where they found the holes to be, which is why they embarked on research to begin with, to fill some gap in the literature. That's how we say that. If you're going to do a study, you don't redo some other study that somebody else has done. You do something new because you already know everything that's been done and you want to add to it. You want to extend that research just a little bit so that everybody in the field understands this issue a little bit more. So one of my pieces of advice to you is go to the reference sheet on an article that you find very interesting and relevant to your own practice and thus research. Look at the references and then read those articles, because that's going to point you in the direction of some robust research. Okay, so I'd like to tell you a little kind of, well, first let me say, how would you go about reading the article? So I would first pull up your topic. Let's say your topic is ADHD. You would want to read 5 different abstracts to pull out one good article. You're not going to read it. So let's say we want to end up with 10 good articles. You're not going to read 10 abstracts, 10 articles, and be done. You're going to probably read, well, I know 50 would be a little bit too much, but you might read 50 abstracts, because when you pull up the title of that article, it sounds like it's the right thing. Then you read the abstract and that really isn't at all what I'm going for. So you have to pass by that one. I know you already spent the time on it, but you have to pass by that one. So after you've read enough abstracts to come up with 10 that sound like they're relevant, they're appropriate, they're recent for your client population, then you read those 10 articles. It still might end up that you're halfway through the article and one isn't relevant. You need to go back to the drawing board on that 10th article. But like I just said, in those references from each article, you'll find other ones that you might want to pull up that didn't come up in your own search. Now make sure that you're going to Blackboard and go through every single thing I posted on week 3, which is primarily literature review, because I show you how to find articles on Madonna's website, on the library website, how to find them on Google Scholar. I'd go to the library first. Google Scholar is a backup. And how to get the appropriate information from them. I'd say you're going to be crunched for time. You're going to have to start learning how to skim through some of these articles, what to look for. Statistics might be somewhat intimidating. You might love it, so go for it. If it is a little bit intimidating, you want to make sure that you've read through their literature review after you've read their abstract, which oftentimes turns into their introduction. You then want to touch base on their methods. Make sure that you think that this is similar or appropriate for your client population, or something that relates to what you're doing. And you really want to look at their findings, outcomes, or discussion. There's different words used. It's near the end of the article, because that will tell you what did they find, as opposed to what did they do to find that. What is not just the conclusion, but what did they find? We found that 9 out of 10 people had a 60% success rate using this intervention alone, and a 90% success rate using this intervention mixed with this other thing. Then in their conclusion, they'll tie it all together. You also want to see if there were holes. They'll describe those weaknesses or holes in their research and what they are suggesting to go forward. That's near the end as well. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of some research that I have done. So I was on a research team in the past that was studying not homelessness, but people who were in public housing and moved into home ownership. So kind of understanding housing, home ownership, but also touching on homelessness. And we did this research project in Denver, Colorado, because they had a very innovative program where when somebody was in public housing, if they enrolled in the program, which had multiple modules of kind of educational modules, they would, if they got a raise in their salary, their income, then instead of charging them more for the public housing, they put that differential, the difference between what they used to make and what they make now, and what they would have been charged, they put it into a bank account. And at the end of the program, after they completed all these educational modules, they would then get that lump sum to put as a down payment on a house so that they could own it. And also that was kind of facilitated through the program. So in embarking on this research, what do you think we needed to know? What do you think was involved in our literature review, which I, quite frankly, was a good piece of what I was responsible for? Well, we had to know what was known about homeownership, what was known about public housing, what was known about the ethnicities involved in the population that we were studying in Denver. I was also responsible for translating all of the documents into Spanish and doing the interviews with all of the Spanish-speaking clients or participants. So that was definitely a piece. Well, what is known about the immigrant population? Is there a difference? First generation, second generation, 1.5 generation? Is there a difference actually by ethnicity or nationality when we go upon this? Because even though I translated everything to Spanish and was responsible for that angle, I also interviewed immigrants from many other countries. This also involved financial literacy. So actually our literature review was quite large and very thematic, because we had to have a piece regarding each one of the modules that we were then teaching these people. Because guess what? We found that they needed these things based on our literature review before setting up our study. We found that they needed budget understanding, financial literacy in general. We found that there was a difference in level of education when it comes to home ownership. So we had to include that piece to our literature review. We had to obviously study public housing, public assistance in general, and results of all prior studies, even if it barely touched on what we were doing, if it had a tiny piece of what we were doing. Now, granted, this was a longitudinal study over many years, with thousands of participants, with many researchers, published internationally and presented in many conferences and so forth. Our literature review was robust, and as was our study. This is not what I'm asking of you. I'm asking of you to consider your issue and make sure that you fully understand it. And how you fully understand it is by reading what has been done and then writing that up as part of your proposal, your evaluation plan. So this takes on more importance, maybe more for me than for somebody else, but the literature review is critical. So I give you multiple steps to it. First, you have this extra credit piece where you can put together an outline, basically just show what articles you're going to be including in where. And then you'll write your literature review. And I'm recommending about 10 articles. That would give you a full breadth. They all should be within the last 10 years, last 5 years ideally, except if there's a seminal article about the beginning of this. So ADHD, has been studied since a certain date, maybe the one article about the beginning of understanding what that is. So with housing, we'd want to include the kind of the beginning. What was done when public housing was first on the books. Okay. So ultimately, I'd like to see this literature review that is complete, robust, includes 10 articles, and completely in my submission box in the assignments by the due date. However, if you do have it in by the due date, you also get a rewrite. If you don't have it in by the due date, you don't get a rewrite. The rewrite, I will make comments and suggestions, and you have a chance to completely change your grade. But you'll also need to submit a one-page, kind of a bullet item report on the changes that you made. So I don't have to necessarily go through line by line to see if you incorporated all of my suggestions, but that you give me a little report, you give me the new lit review, and then if you got a B on the first one and you submit a new literature review and it's phenomenal, you will have an A in the literature review. It just completely gets rid of that first grade. If you do not submit the literature review on time, the first time you can rewrite it all you want, which you must do anyway for the final report, but you won't get a new grade on it. And this is it's graded multiple times because it's an important piece of your final evaluation. So I think I've probably bored you enough with this. Please watch everything that I've posted, read everything that I've posted for week 3, because there's a lot of information about how to go about this. And it is important. And it also will teach you. It'll teach you so much about your issue, your area of interest, that you'll then become a bit of an expert on this, which you will take into the field. So I would highly suggest you pick something relevant to the type of practice you want to be doing in 8 months, 7 months. And then you can claim that this is part of your expertise. And it also might teach you that you're not really that interested in this. So after you get a few articles in, you might change your topic. That's okay too. Okay, good luck. Send me questions.